Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Phil Wesley, the Mile High Mouth, and today we're going to take a look at horror games, or rather Halloween, spoopy, or whatever you want to call it, games on the Nintendo DS. We've actually got 10 here in no particular order, and then 8 with honorable mentions. And then there's some stuff that are kind of dishonorable mentions, which we're not going to go into. Well, we might not go into them in too much depth. First things first, in order to be on this list, it has to be somehow Halloween related. So witches and vampires and ghouls and terror and horror. In no real particular order, let's get this stuff out of the way. This particular game will not be on this list. It's terrifying, and it won't be on here. I'm also no good at it, so you'll never see a play for it. Maybe you'll see a gaming paraphilia of it in the future, but yeah, I'm no good at it, and it's terrible. But yeah, this is not going to be on the list. There are some other items that won't be on here. Before we start, I'd like to mention there is an odd one, Witches and Vampires and Vampire Legends, The Power of Three. And these won't be on this list either. They're actually RPGs. And they're actually a sequel to each other. Witches and Vampires is the first game. Vampire Legends: The Power of Three is the second. They follow 3 superpowered teenage witch vampire characters. One of them's named Ruby. Whatever. And this one in particular has you doing weird gestures in front of your camera. And this one over here has you writing in the spells or whatnot. It's weird. And they're not going to be on this list, but I just wanted to mention them anyways. Another one that's not on this list is A Witch's Tale, which I haven't been able to track down a copy of yet. But yeah, let's start with the beginning. Start at the very beginning of our list. We have our honorable mentions and our top 10. For number 1, this is an odd choice. 100 classic books. I know what you're thinking. What? Isn't that kind of a cop-out? Yeah, it kind of is. That one and this particular game, Junior Classic Books, if you have these, you have Dracula, you have The Hound of Baskervilles, you have a ton of Grimm's fairy tales. You have a lot of terrifying things to keep you awake at night, including some strange political books in 100 Classic Books, and some really odd Grimm's fairy tales in Junior Classic Books. I know that's a little bit of a cop-out for number 10, but I'm going with the literal, like, terrifying things. I mean, this is all Halloween-related and themed, and what better way to spend Halloween than to go and read the original Dracula? It's quite good. Let's flip it over and take a look at what's over here in our honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 8 is Death Jr. and the Science Fair of Doom. Originally on the PSP, I remember when Death Jr. was like, oh, you need to buy a PSP because of Death Jr. It'll never show up. Yeah, this is a game that's, it's an original title for the Nintendo DS. Back when, well, Death Jr. ended up on every system anyways. Back when the DS completely kicked the PSP's butt, it never really had a chance anywhere else except for, like, you know, Japan, because of Monster Hunter. And then the Nintendo 3DS got Monster Hunter, and that was it. The Vita didn't even stand a chance there. Anyways, let's move that out of the way. It's a pretty good action title. I'll move that out to the side. Oh, or another honorable mention before we go to the others would be Lux Pain. It's an anime-inspired thing where you're looking for the darkness in people's, well, the shinin. It's a weird visual novel. It has some pretty good horror aspects to it, psychological horror aspects, and it's worth checking out. Some pretty decent voice acting, and as far as visual novels go, it's pretty good. It may not be the last one you see on this list. Let's flip this over. For our next one, let's see, we have Dementium the Ward. Now, Dementium 1 and Dementium 2 from Renegade Kid are pretty good first-person horror shooters. In fact, they're getting remastered. Well, this one's already out on the 3DS, and this one's getting remastered for the 3DS. I definitely recommend checking those out. And it takes up slot 2 on our top 10 countdown because it's a good game with some decent jump scares and some genuinely grotesque imagery. Well, speaking of grotesque imagery, let's get down to number 3. That would be Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. Now, Aria of Sorrow is brilliant. Dawn of Sorrow, it's an okay sequel to it. However, Castlevania inspired a bunch of other games on the DS as well, including Castlevania Portrait of Ruin and Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, and those are fantastic. If you're a fan of Castlevania, ignore Mirror of Fate on the 3DS. It's not as good as these older DS games. They still fetch a pretty hefty penny, but they're worth checking out because they're really, really good. Also, they inspired this particular game, which would be Barnyard Blast Swine of the Night. This game, it's okay, but the people who are translating it or writing for it decided to fill it entirely with memes. So it's kind of like a side-scrolling pork Castlevania thing with references to Bad Dudes and Legend of Zelda and all sorts of weird references. It's like if you've played Retro City Rampage, it has kind of the same sense of humor. And it's inspired by Castlevania, and it's like, to an extent. Moving on, let's get to number 4 on our top 10. And it is Witch's Wish. Now, this one's an RPG that we put on here because, well, it's kind of, I would say it's a cross between kind of Harry Potter, Harvest Moon-ish RPG thing. Reminds me a little bit of Rhapsody in some aspects. And Rhapsody's pretty good, but Rhapsody's not really that Halloween themed. And this one is in here because of the witch theme. And it's cute. And you'll note that not everything in our list is scary, but some are. Let's go ahead and put number 4 down, and let's get over to our honorable mentions again. Our third honorable mention is Plants vs. Zombies. Again, this is a game that's not spooky. It's more playful and fun. There's 2 different versions of this. There's the DS game, which I'm holding here, and then the DSi game, which you can get on the DSiWare shop. Now, this game, the DS one, has much more options to it than the DSiWare one, which is kind of a shame if you ask me. But yeah, that's one of those that really should be ported to the 3DS. Another one in our honorable mentions would be Vampire Moon, The Mystery of the Hidden Sun. Essentially what happens is a young lady goes to Transylvania to investigate a never-ending eclipse. And it's a hidden object game. And hidden object games, there's a ton of them on here, like Millionaire or there's quite a few of those hidden object games. I don't know why there were so many of those on the DS. I don't know who was buying them. Probably people like me who like the story. And this one actually has a pretty good story. And it is, of course, Dracula related, so it comes back to Dracula, which is on both of these and uncensored on both of them. But yeah, let's put Vampire Moon, The Mystery of the Hidden Sun, away for a moment. Okay, let's do one more honorable mention, and that would be Touch the Dead. Touch the Dead is a, let's see, it's a touch 'em up. You tap the screen as horrifying zombies and stuff show up to you. They're damage sensitive, so you gotta tap quick and tap accurately. Weird little game, full of gratuitous gore and a weird premise. But it's good. It's good for if you can find this one cheap, pick it up. If you can't find it cheap, still pick it up if you like weird action-y games where you have to tap things. Now let's get back to our list. Number 5 on our list is Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue. Now there is a sequel or a reboot of this game on the Nintendo 3DS, and there's a version of this on DSiWare. The difference between the DSiWare version and the DS version is there's no difference. Actually, the DSiWare version is just the DS game on that you can download it onto your system. It's just a downloadable copy of the DS game. But yeah, Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue is a Legendary Wings style kind of shooter. I mean, you're moving along the bottom of the screen and firing various weapons up at zombies that take a lot of hits and avoiding all sorts of stuff coming up there. It's kind of like a bullet hell zombie walker across all sorts of fantasy or rather fairy tale lands. It also has a weird sense of humor and a lot of fan service to it. Now the sequel to it, which is 3D, is a better game by and far, but this one is definitely worth your time to check out. They're both pretty good. So we're about halfway through our list. Let's get to another one of our honorable mentions. And that would be Monster Tale. Yeah, Monster Tale is not really horror themed so much as it's awesome. It's kind of a Metroidvania style game, and it's a weird unofficial sequel to Henry Hatsworth and the Puzzling Adventure. Both of these are insanely good, and Monster Tale is getting a 3DS version in the future, so look forward to that. Excellent game. These people also made the Epic Mickey game for the Nintendo 3DS, and that's okay, but their first efforts, Henry Hatsworth and the Puzzling Adventure and A Monster Tale, are superb. I would say they're 100% games. They're games you should definitely pick up. Okay, now let's get back to our next in the line. We've done our first 500 classic books, Deventium, Castlevania, Witch's Wish, and Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue. Now let's see what number 6 is. And that would be Touch Detective. Now, Touch Detective isn't so much scary as it is kind of a little spooky. In other words, it's the art style that really helps it along. Lots of terrifyingly phallic mushrooms in here, and terrible jokes and puns, and touching. Lots of touching. It's very Tim Burton-esque, and it's just got a weird style to it. It's definitely worth checking out, and Touch Detective 1 and 2.5 are available on the Nintendo DS. They're actually really cheap at GameStop, so you should probably pick them up. Oh, one thing that's kind of a treat, everything we're mentioning here will work on any DS system. From the Nintendo DS to the new 3DS XL to whatever, from the oldest to the newest, it'll work on it. Now let's look at one of our last 2 honorable mentions, and that would be Scooby-Doo's First Frights. This game by Taurus Games of Yoda Stories fame is actually pretty good. Lots of over-reliance on CGI, and for some bizarre reason they abandoned the really great puzzle-solving aspect of the Game Boy Color Scooby-Doo and gave us a game where the worst part about it is the jumping and combat. And I'm really saying that, yeah, there's combat in here. You play as Scooby-Doo or Shaggy from time to time, and when you're a Scooby-Doo, you're knocking over trash cans with sausages to... Yeah, I had to mention it because it actually is kind of Halloween themed. I mean, there's spooky mysteries and things to solve, and that's always fun. It's a fun little game, although some of its choices are weird. Yeah. Oh, let's get to the last of our honorable mentions. Our last honorable mention is Insecticide. Like Touch Detective, this is here for the art style and for kind of the story. It's a pretty good 3D action platforming adventure game that kind of makes me think of stuff like, well, I would actually recommend people check this out if you're a fan of stuff like Psychonauts or Grim Fandango or some weird stuff like that, but you wish that those had more jumping and more shooting at things. And you wish they were in an insect world where you play a cop. It's pretty good. Spooky atmosphere for it, and that's why it's on an honorable mention and not on the actual list. Because, bugs are Halloween themed, sort of. Now let's get to our last 4. Number 4, 999. 9 persons, 9 hours, 9 doors. This is the psychological equivalent of Saw. It's part of the Zero Escape series, which deviates from like incredible gore and horror to heartbreaking sadness among the trilogy of games. Excellent, and I've heard that they're going to do a Vita remaster of 999 and a PC remaster of 999. So hopefully they'll make a 3DS one too, because I will buy it immediately if they do that. But yeah, this is an excellent game. There's a lot of reading and a lot of thought put into it, but it's got a lot of fantastic high-stress situations, and it's a type of slow burn horror where you're going to think about it long after you've completed this game. Now let's get to our final three. Number 3 on our list is the Rosia. Now this is one of the few that's genuinely an actual horror game. The Rosia is a first-person horror adventure style game similar to like Shadowgate. And if you missed stuff like PT, or if you thought that that Resident Evil 7 demo was pretty good, maybe you should check out the Rosia. It is pretty underrated, and it is a good time, if not a weirdly disturbing and fairly gory time. So let's pop that into our list. Now, number 2 on our list. Remember, these are not in any particular order, other than that I slipped them in this order. So, let's see what number 2 is. Number 2 is Resident Evil Deadly Silence. Resident Evil Revelations is one of my favorite games on 3DS. Resident Evil Deadly Silence is a port of the original PlayStation game that invented, or rather reinvented, survival horror. It's fantastic. There's 2 ways to play it. Rebirth mode, which has you slicing at the screen at zombies, which is kind of dumb. And then the original mode, which is just the PlayStation 1 game, complete with terrible cutscenes. It's still the king. It's still good. It's got tank controls, of course, but it wouldn't be Resident Evil without that. It is truly a frightening experience. It's kind of expensive still these days, but it's totally worth the money. And it's one of the better portable Resident Evil games. The others being Resident Evil Gaiden, Resident Evil Mercenaries, and Resident Evil Revelations. But yeah, Resident Evil Deadly Silence, fantastic. You should check it out. It's a good port of the original Resident Evil game. Now, what could possibly be number 1 on our list? Well, let's get to it. We've gotten all of our honorable mentions, so let's get to our first one. But first, let's rescue those. Okay. Zombie Barbecue. And Touch Detective. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think these were, did I switch these around? No. I think it'll be fine. Anyways, here we are. Our top 9 so far were 100 Classic Books, Dementium, Castlevania, Witch's Wish, Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie Barbecue, Touch Detective, 999, Rosia, and Resident Evil. Now remember, these aren't in any particular order, just in case I accidentally swapped those 2. Anyways, what's our number 1 game though? And genuinely, the last 4 or so were essentially ones that I had to arrange by best or whatnot. Rather, in my opinion, the best Halloween-themed ones. And that would be... What's our top one? It's Ghost Trick. I know people are like, wait, what? That's not a spooky game. Yeah, it is. It kind of is. It's about, you play as a ghost. And that's very Halloween-ish. Not everything on our Halloween list has to be horror. Some of it can be clever ghost stories. And Ghost Trick, where you play a kind of powerful poltergeist who hangs out with a pretty punny pup named Missile, and you're trying to figure out what went horribly wrong and fix it. It's a pretty good game. It's from the guy that made the Phoenix Wright games. I think that's Shu Takumi, who I think also may have worked on some other Capcom games that are just kind of like evading my thoughts right now. Anyways, the person behind the Phoenix Wright games made this fantastic kind of puzzly action game. It takes a bit of thought, and it's something that you should definitely have haunting your your DS unit at this point in time. And like I said, let's take a look at our list. Okay, our list includes from left to right. Let's move this in a bit. It's going to sound a little rickety. Okay, we've got 100 classic books. We have Dementium, Castlevania, Which is Wish, Zombie, Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue, Touch Detective, which I think actually these are supposed to be over here. Trying to remember? I forgot. I know, I didn't have like Shin Megami Tensei in here. You'd think it would be, but that's for a different list. And then 999, Teresia, Resident Evil, Deadly Silence, and Ghost Trick. I suggest you check out these games to have a fun DS Halloween. Yeah, they're all worth playing. That's why they're on this list, and they're worth tracking down, if just not a little bit spooky. So, tell me what your thoughts are. Do you own any of these? Are there any games that you feel should have been on this list that weren't? Let me know in the comments below. And hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until the next spooky video, you are now caught up.